Hello friends, welcome to CEC Live Lectures. Dear friends, today we are going to talk on Śabda Pramāna once again. We have conducted one session and we have tried to understand the importance of Śabda Pramāna in classical Indian philosophy. Friends, we have a lot more for you under this topic, so we are going to cover this topic in detail. And for the discussion on the topic, we have with us in our studios Dr. Ajay Verma. Dr. Ajay Verma is Associate Professor in Center for Philosophy, School of Social Sciences, JNU. Dr. Verma is a prolific professor, and through him we always get in-depth knowledge on various topics. We believe that today also you are going to grab maximum knowledge, maximum information through him. So let's welcome our guest, Dr. Ajay Verma. Hello sir, welcome to the lecture.
Thank you, Gipka. Hello viewers. So as you're already aware, we have been talking about the importance of Śabda Pramāna and different philosophical issues involved in that. We have already sort of had one session on that, and to have a quick recapitulation of what we have discussed so far, we would remember that first of all we discussed about we had a discussion on the importance of Śabda Pramāna in classical Indian philosophy. And there, we saw that the basic the basic idea of षड् darshanas or six orthodox schools has been the foundational basis of this division is the belief in verbal authority. So, what do we mean by verbal authority? What we understand by verbal authority is belief that Vedic corpus, and when whatever is written in the Vedas comes along with its own validity. So, there has to be some kind of a sacrosanct character that we believe, to be there when it comes to Vedic literature. So, truth of the Vedic literature is not dependent upon something else. So, the dominant view, especially the views that Prabhakar has proposed about this idea is that the Vedic sentences come along with their own truth. So we would remember that this division between the orthodox schools and the heterodox schools is based on their acceptance of verbal authority of the Vedas or otherwise. So orthodox schools, six schools, what we call षड् darshanas, they believe in verbal authority of the Vedas, and the three heterodox schools, which includes Buddhism, Jainism, and Charvakas, they do not accept the verbal authority of the Vedas. So that's one of the main distinctions. So also, as we just saw, there are several questions, that crop up whenever we're talking, when we say that the truth of the content of the Vedic literature comes along with those words itself. Somehow it's supposed to be something intrinsic to it. As proposed by Prabhakar, it comes along with several other problems. So basic epistemological issues in that crops up. So when we say that Vedas, come along with a kind of a verbal authority. So, whatever is written in the Vedas, is a source of knowledge, is an independent source of knowledge. This comes along with its own epistemological, sort of justifications, which we'll have to give arguments to justify that because ordinarily, if something's written in a book, we don't believe that whatever is written in a particular book is true, is to be accepted. So there have to be reasons why whatever is written in particular scriptures, here in question is the Vedic corpus, then we must offer reasons, and we saw that different schools offer different reasons, regarding why Vedic words have a scriptural authority of their own, and as we would remember, that according to Naiyayikas, the Vedic words are the words of God. So their argument goes something like this. that their argument is basically, sort of somewhere based on inference. So they say that whenever we find a written word, we know that it has an author. So any word, whether spoken or written, would have a source. So if it's a spoken word, there would be, immediately we sort of, our mind would think of a speaker who utters those words. And whenever we think about some written words, we immediately sort of, our mind goes a step back, and we can think of a person who wrote those words. So words are authors. So there is some authority behind words. So either they are spoken by somebody or they are written by somebody. So similarly, the words of the Vedas must have a writer too. And that writer, according to the Naiyayikas, is God. And since, God would never tell a lie, therefore, the truth of Vedic corpus derives from, its source, which is God. But Mimamsakas take a very different line of argument here, and they say that the authority, the verbal authority of the Vedas, is not dependent, is not contingent upon any extraneous factor. So according to them, Vedic word, has a sacrosanct nature, comes with, verbal authority of its own, because they are aparushe. They are unauthored words, so they don't have any author. So these words, in a certain sense, are timeless, are unauthored. And since, they are themselves a kind of starting point, to use another word, they are in a certain self, causa sui, the word that's used by Spinoza, since, there is no origin behind them. Therefore, their authority is absolute. Whether, absolute authority actually follows from the fact of authorlessness of the Vedas or not, that is a moot point that we wouldn't take into consideration in the present lecture. So, but these are some of the epistemological difficulties that immediately would crop up when we say that certain corpus of literature, say for example Vedas, have a verbal authority of their own, and therefore whatever is contained in particular books like Vedas has to be considered as having a truth value of their own, not driven, which is not sort of derived from anywhere else. So these are some of the issues at stake, and when we talk about verbal authority of the Vedic literature, and then there are also counter perspectives among them, as we sort of learnt in an earlier lecture, Chavakas, who say that words being abstract entities and things being concrete entities. There cannot be any point of contact between the two. So these are some of the the factors which contribute to a special importance that is given to verbal authority, or Śabda as Pramāna in classical Indian philosophy, and this entire distinction between orthodox schools and heterodox schools is mainly based upon the acceptance or non-acceptance of verbal authority of the Vedas. Now, having said that, and in our last lecture we also sort of had a brief discussion regarding what is actually indicated, what is referred to by words. Is it a particular, but particular is changing, is always under a constant flux, as also pointed out dominantly by the Buddhist philosophers. So a word which is unchanging cannot refer to something that is changing. So does it refer to something unchanging, namely universal, or some kind of a metaphysical entity that Naiyayikas believe in and Buddhists challenge? So So according to some schools of thought, say for example Mimamsakas, words primarily refer to the universals. For grammarians also, they only refer to the universals and nothing else. Whereas for Naiyayikas, they refer to both the universal and particular. They refer to a particular as qualified by the universal. And Buddhists have a very different take on the issue, which we would discuss at more length today. But their basic idea is that words do not make any direct reference to the object pointed out. So words make a sense through exclusion of all the possible other references, and this is called apohavad. So now, having said that, there are some other metaphysical issues that are taken up in various texts of Indian philosophy and are discussed at length, and among them is also the problem of word meaning and the sentential meaning, and this is what we would develop on in today's lecture. So now, what is the problem of word meaning and the sentential meaning? The problem is something like this. Ordinarily, we believe that words have their own independent meaning. We don't generally think twice about it. This is a general belief that we all sort of hold and follow. We generally believe that language is learned by learning the words first, and then through the knowledge of grammar we start constructing sentences. But though this sort of whether this is the correct way of talking about language learning is not is a moot point, because we know that when it comes to our mother tongue, most of the time we don't have to learn. Not most of the times, never do we have to learn the grammar first, and then we learn the language. So how we learn a language is a huge mystery. And some of the philosophers like Noam Chomsky have a very different take on the issue. They propose a theory which is based on innatism, which basically is a suggestion that a language, is already kind of exists. The structures, of language are already existent in our mind. And through empirical means, they are just kind of, so to speak, invoked. And grammarians, among them especially Bhartrhari, accepts this kind of line of argument, though not exactly in the same way as Chomsky proposes. So Bhartrhari's idea is also that we have some kind of linguistic capacity in our consciousness, which is there are several names for that. It's called pratibha. There is another word that he uses, namely shabdana, linguisticality. So there are special distinction that human beings have is shabdana. We sort of use language in with a kind of complexity that probably no other animal does. So language learning is a very different kind of a problem that's taken up in philosophy in general, and in philosophy as well. So, but another sort of issue, very important issue when it comes to Vedic literature and verbal authority thereof is that of the meaning of the word and the sentences. And the philosophical problem that lies here is that according to Mimamsakas, their inquiry is basically focused on the nature of dharma. So the Mimamsa Sutras, the first sutra in the beginning is Athatu Dharma Jigyasa, which means therefore an inquiry into the nature of dharma. So their basic inquiry is to understand the nature of dharma. And their assumption is that Vedas are basically, the Vedic word basically performs one function, that is of giving us suggestions or of instilling in us a sense of dharma. So words have a kind of a literal meaning. That's called Śabda Pramāna. Vedic words come along with some kind of an intended meaning, and when somebody hears Vedic words being chanted, or when one reads the Vedic words, this Śabda Pramāna is internalized and becomes what is called Arthi Bhavana. And Arthi Bhavana, instills in us a sense of duty and propels us and impels us and creates an impulse in us to perform dutiful activities, which, in the case of the Vedas, would be to perform certain yagyas, to perform certain yagnas. So this is, the basic underlying belief that Mimamsakas work with. So for them, Vedas are basically a set of injunctions. For Prabhakaras, they are only exclusively injunctive sentences. So Vedic sentences enjoin us to perform certain actions, and are not mere descriptions of any facts. So as a matter of fact, even if there are descriptive sentences occurring somewhere in the Vedas, they are interpreted, in the light of some other injunctive sentences. Or, for Prabhakaras, descriptive sentences also have to be read as if they were injunctions, in the sense that, like as if they were suggestive of some action. A classical example, in this case is, there is a sentence in one of the Vedas which says, "Varuna's tears shone like silver." So this is interpreted as never offer silver, to the priest in a yagya. So even descriptive sentences are interpreted in a certain way, as if they were suggestive of certain actions, certain suggestions regarding certain actions. So this is some of the basic ideas that Mimamsaka philosophers work with. But the issue regarding sentential meaning and word meaning is something like this. If we believe that words have their own independent meaning, that would mean that words, if they have their own independent meaning, then, when they occur in a sentence, it seems to us that a larger meaning is, gets created and is given to us. So, words, when they come together in a sentence as parts of a sentence, seem to create a larger meaning, called sentential meaning, vakyarth, which is, over and above the individual meanings of the word otherwise. Now, the problem the problem that immediately crops up when we entertain such idea is that if words have their own meaning, and when they come together and create some kind of an additional larger meaning, namely sentential meaning, vakyarth, in that case, this coming together of words and forming larger units, there has to be some kind of an intermediary function that needs to be performed. I mean, we can understand it like this. If words were building blocks, say for example, like if let's compare them to bricks. So when we sort of start constructing a building, we construct it by brick by brick. We place brick one after the other, and we cement them together, and we sort of thereby are able to construct a wall. So now, if words were similarly such units, that would imply some kind of human agency, some kind of an agency, which would be required for putting them together, and ensuing of a larger sort of meaning, namely sentential meaning. But if we say, if the moment we hold on to such belief, the moment we propound such belief, that would mean that whatever words we are talking about require some kind of human intervention in order for the meaning to emerge from the sentence. So that would mean that the participation, so to speak, of the hearer or of the reader becomes necessary in order to glean out a meaning out of a sentence. So meaning generation process, in that case, would be a result of working out on the part of the reader or the listener. Now, if that is the case, what's the problem? I mean, this is the question that would come up, that would crop up in our mind. Now, the question, the problem that immediately sort of comes forth the moment we believe that words have their own meaning is something like this. If words have their own meaning, and they form larger unities when they occur in a sentence, and since as just pointed out, it requires human intervention, then the meaning of the sentence becomes contingent upon the hearer or the listener. But any orthodox philosophies, especially especially the belief that Vedas, the Vedic sentences, have their own truth, and which is not dependent upon, which is not contingent upon any extrinsic factors, that would be challenged the moment we accept, that meaning is, a result of working out on the part of the reader, and this idea of working out the meaning by the hearer or by the reader is a necessary fallout if we believe that words are independent units of meaning. So that is one of the issues at stake. Now, having understood that, we could also approach this problem from the point of view of metaphysics of part and whole. And as we are aware, the problem of part and whole is a classical problem in philosophy. How do parts add up to make a whole? Do parts cease to have a separate identity apart from the whole? Is whole more than the sum of its parts? These are some of the perennial problems of metaphysics of part and whole in philosophy. In classical Indian theories of meaning, this problem appears in a different garb. Varnas or phonemes or letters go on to constitute words, and words together in a sentence constitute sentential meaning. Do words retain their individual meaning in a sentence? If not, how is the unity of meaning in a sentence, which is a group of words, formed? These are some of the problems that classical Indian theories of meaning deal with. So, as we already know, that part and whole is one of the sort of perennial metaphysical problems in Indian philosophy, and there are several takes on the issue. So, whether part sort of keeps its identity even when it goes on to make a different whole. So now, how is this relevant? How is the part, this metaphysics of part and whole relevant for theories of meaning? If we believe that words have individual meaning, then they are parts of a larger unit, namely that of sentence. There would be and immediately the moment we accept that, there are questions like, do words have their own meaning which contributes to the sentential meaning, or words come to have a meaning only in a sentence, and outside of it they do not have any meaning, or at least they do not have any definite meaning? So, as we know that even in dictionaries, mere synonyms don't sort of take you very far in understanding the meaning of a word. So you understand the meaning of a word better if you know the usage of it in some sentences. All right, and in different sentences, the word, even though there could be similarity of meaning, but sort of a word basically gets its meaning depending upon the sentential context. At times, words may not carry their literal meaning, but if we understand the overall import of the sentence, we would understand in what sense the word has been used. So there we have to reflect upon the meaning of the word in the light of the overall drift of the meaning in the sentence. So word has to be interpreted depending upon the context of the sentence. So the moment we think of words as parts and sentential meaning as whole and sentences as whole, this problem, several of these problems immediately sort of make their appearance, before our mind. Do words have meaning only in sentential context? All words have meaning independent of the sentential context? If that is so, then how is the meaning generated? If words have separate meanings of their own, then they stand in relation, they stand in need to bear a relationship with other words in the sentence. And then, the moment we talk about, some kind of a relationship between different words, then, another metaphysical problem comes up regarding how two words are related to each other. So now the philosophers, especially sort of like grammarians and Prabhakaras, believe that sentential meaning has primacy over the word meaning. The reason for that is because of Prabhakaras point out that since Vedic words are injunctive words, since Vedic sentences are injunctive sentences, and they enjoin certain kind of actions to be performed, so therefore, therefore, it follows from here that enjoining a particular, any kind of an action requires at least a sentence. So a sentence with a verb, so primarily it requires at least a verb, but there could be even one-word sentences like go, like run, and so on and so forth. But here words are being used as as complete in themselves, as if they were kind of complete sentences. So, according to Prabhakaras, Vedas are only a set of injunctions, and this is the task that they are performing. And for that, for the purpose of injunctions, you require at least a sentence, and therefore only sentences have primary meaning, and words and their meaning make appearance only within, could only be considered within the context of the sentence, within the context of the overall action that's been enjoined in a particular sentence. So therefore, grammarians and Prabhakaras believe that sentential meaning has primacy over words and their meaning. So, friends, we'll continue our discussion on word meaning and sentential meaning. We'll take a short break here and we'll return in a moment. Thank you.
With this note, thank you so very much for giving us this productive session on Śabda Pramāna. Dear friends, we try to understand the importance of Śabda Pramāna and what Śabda Pramāna is. Friends, there is a lot more for you. You are requested to be with us as we are back after a short break. Thank you. Hello friends, welcome back to this session. Friends, as you know that today we are talking on Śabda Pramāna and we are trying to grab maximum knowledge through our expert. Our expert is Dr. Ajay Verma. Dr. Ajay Verma is an eminent professor of philosophy and through the live platform of CEC, we always get in-depth knowledge on various issues, various topics through him. So let's welcome our guest, Dr. Ajay Verma, once again. Hello sir, welcome to the session.
Okay. Hello viewers, welcome back. So we were talking about the problem of word meaning and the sentential meaning, whether words are independent unit bearing independent meaning bearing units, or whether they come to have meaning at all only when they occur in certain sentences. So there are several takes on this issue. There are mainly philosophers are divided basically along two lines. So there are mainly two takes on this issue to begin with. So the basic question that crops up when we're talking about a sentence as a whole and words as its parts is that whether does sentence have parts at all. So Bhartrhari's answer, Bhartrhari who is a grammarian, his answer is no, and this this line of argument, this kind of a response, forms one part of the argument which is called akhanda paksha, akhanda meaning non-partite, impartite. So according to Bhartrhari, sentences does not have parts at all. So sentence is without parts. So as we would recall, according to Bhartrhari, sentence is a sort of set of phonemes, so it doesn't have parts. For conventional purposes, we generally break it into parts, but words don't have a reality of their own. So this is one line of argument, which is called a akhanda paksha, and one propounder of it is Bhartrhari. And the other line of argument is that words do have parts. So in Nyaya and Mimamsa schools answer in affirmative to the question, does sentence have parts at all? So they believe that the sentence does have real parts, and those real parts are words. And now, what are the arguments in favor of akhanda paksha that are offered by Bhartrhari? Akhanda paksha, as we know, is the view that sentence is a complete unit without any real parts. So it's a kind of a non-dualist take on the issue of language. So arguments that are offered by Bhartrhari, of course, there are extensive arguments, so we would discuss them very, very briefly here. So the arguments offered by Bhartrhari is, one argument is, if a word has a meaning in a sentence as a part, it should be carried on to the level of phonemes as well. But if words have, if sentences have parts like words, and then words can also be further divided into units, namely phonemes or letters. So say for example the word word is constituted of 4 letters, WORD. So if in a sentence a particular word has a meaning, then some kind of a meaning should be attached to the parts of the words as well. But that would complicate issues for us beyond rescue. So generally we don't want to believe that letters which constitute words have any meaning, but we want to believe that words, when they constitute a sentence, come to have a meaning. So Bhartrhari says that sentences, therefore, which instill in us a sense of duty, these sentences are impartite. They do not have any real parts at all. But for conventional purposes, for pragmatic reasons, we do often break them into parts. But from the point of view of metaphysics, these parts are not real at all. They are not sort of real individual meaning-bearing units. Another argument that is offered by Bhartrhari is there is no infallible consistency to be found in the formation of words. Say, for example, there is the word I, which means referring to oneself. It's a reflexive pronoun. But the letter I, which is used as a word, as a pronoun, when it's used as a pronoun in a sentence, also occurs in the word in, which is a preposition. But now the letter I in the word in has nothing to do with the reflexive, sense, when it's used as a pronoun. So it doesn't carry the same sense in another word when it occurs in another word, namely in. Now the word in occurs in bin, but the word bin is again of a very different kind. So the word in, which is a preposition, that same meaning is not carried on in the word bin. Now this word bin could be further extended to another word, namely bing, which means a heap, specially of metallic ore or waste or of waste from a mine. Now in this word, this word has nothing to do with the word bin. If there were any consistency, then I, the way we use it in a particular sentence, the same meaning should have been carried on in a larger word, and then the word in should have carried on its meaning in a still larger word, bin, and the meaning of the word bin should have carried its meaning in a larger word, bing, and there could still be another word, binge, where the word bing occurs, but again the word binge has nothing to do with bing, because the word binge means excessive indulgence, and it has nothing to do with the word bing. So the idea here is that Bhartari points out that if words have their own individual meaning, then they should carry that meaning in when these words occur in larger units. And then we saw some examples from English, but that doesn't happen. So we sort of that. So therefore, the case for words having their own independent individual meaning is weakened by these by these examples. So, since words do not retain their meaning in larger words, therefore, words, when they occur in larger unities, also we cannot say for certain that they carry their own meaning. Therefore, on Bhartari's account, breaking down of sentence into words is a conventional division, but there is no reality to it beyond this. So this is generally how Bhartari, who propounds verbal holism or verbal non-dualism, looks at the issue of sentential and sentential meaning and word meaning. As opposed to that, Nyaya and both the schools of Mimamsa agree in holding that sentence has real parts which are words, and words are expressive of meaning, of their own independent meaning, and make their own contribution, and they contribute to the sentential meaning as well. But these schools are divided over the issue of whether words carry their own meaning apart from the sentence as well, apart from their occurrence in a sentence as well. To put it differently, the issue is, do words have their own independent meaning, which constitutes the sentential meaning in turn, or they have a meaning in a sentence and not apart from it? The question here is also that of primacy of sentential meaning over word meaning, or vice versa. Concomitant question also concerns whether sentences have their own independent meaning apart from any projection on the part of the knower. So as we sort of just discussed, one of the main issues is that we want to believe that that Vedic word carries its own truth and validity, which is not contingent upon any other factors, because otherwise it will lose its value as a separate source of knowledge, as an independent source of knowledge, as an independent pramana. So the idea here is that since Vedic word has a truth, carries a truth in itself, the truth of it is intrinsic to it, and therefore it is a separate source of knowledge, and its authority is not contingent upon any extrinsic factor, any extraneous factor. Therefore, to maintain that idea, to keep that idea, to defend that idea, we'll have to believe that, sentences are autonomous units. So that would also sort of require us to believe that sentential meaning has primacy over word meanings, because moment we grant an independent meaning to the words, that would require some kind of meaning attribution, or that would require some kind of human intervention in order to sort of generate meaning, which is the term for that is akshep. Another term, which is also considered as a separate pramana in itself by the Bhattas, is arthapatti. So according to Bhattas, as opposed to Prabhakaras, who believe that words come to have meaning only in the context of a sentence. So Bhattas believe that words have their own individual meaning, and sentential meaning is constructed or is worked out from those word meanings by through the function of akshepa or arthapatti. So other questions at stake here is meaning generated through also some extraneous conditions which need to be ensured for the word meaning to express itself, and also an interpretative task on the part of the reader. So as we just talked about it, if we believe that words have their own independent meaning, that would require some kind of interpretative task on the part of the reader. So how words come together and a meaning is projected has to be in that case projected from the side of the reader. Prabhakaras deny that. They deny what? They deny that word meanings, that some kind of extraneous conditions are to be met in order for the sentential meaning to emerge. So, according to Prabhakara, smallest unit of language required to convey a sense of injunction is a sentence. Therefore, words are expressive of their meaning only within the framework of the imperative, the sense of command conveyed by a sentence. Their theory of meaning is called, that is Prabhakara theory of meaning is called Anvitabidhan Vad, which and is based on an assumption that words express their meaning only within the context of the sentence and not outside of it. On this view, though there are many words and therefore many meanings, the unity of the sentential meaning, is achieved through the unity of purpose presented in a given injunction. So injunctions, have a unity of purpose, and they sort of enjoin a particular action to be performed, and this is where their unity is driven from. So there is an inbuilt, there is some kind of a unity that is intrinsic to the sentence itself, which doesn't, come from anywhere outside of it, and meaning of the word, has to be abstracted from that unity of purpose which is presented in a given injunction, and injunctions occur at least, the requirement for injunction is at least a sentence. So, as opposed to Prabhakara views, as opposed to this view, Nyaya and Bhatta propose Abhitan Vyavad, according to which words have their own independent meaning, and in a sentence, under certain other syntactic conditions, they form a larger unit of meaning in the form of sentential meaning. So as we saw earlier, according to Nyayikas and Bhattas, words are individual meaning-bearing units, and they are when necessary and sufficient conditions are met, the effect comes forth. This is generally, so we could look at it from the point of view of the theory of cause and effect as well. So for Nyayikas, what constitutes the cause is, an aggregate of necessary and sufficient conditions, which could be conscious and unconscious in nature, which could be material or, of the nature of consciousness. Bodh abodh samagri, as it is called, when this aggregate of sufficient necessary conditions, takes place, then the effect immediately comes to the fore. So, words, could be considered as causes, and when certain sufficient necessary conditions, which are like certain syntactical conditions and certain other interpretative conditions are met, then the meaning of the word immediately comes forth, and we have already spoken about these conditions: akangsha, yogyata, sannidhi, tatparya. These are the four conditions which when met, the words immediately result in some kind of a sentential meaning, a larger sentential meaning. Now, we have taken a stock of these two different positions, Anvitabhidhanvad and Abhidhanyavad. Anvitabhidhanvad is a position propounded by Prabhakar Mimamsakas, and Abhidhanyavad is a position adhered to by the Bhatta Mimamsakas and the Nyayikas. Now let's try and look at some of the arguments that are presented by Bhattas against Prabhakaras. So Bhatta's arguments against Prabhakaras are somewhat like this. One of the arguments is, could be called superfluity argument. They say that if words have a meaning only in a sentence, then all words except one would be redundant if words have meaning only in a sentence. So the idea here is that if words outside of a sentence do not have any meaning, that would mean the moment first word is uttered, we know everything about that sentence, because that word would have meaning only in a sentence and not outside of it. Therefore, the moment first word is uttered, the entire sentential meaning would be known. And this argument works equally well against Khandapaksha as well. If a sentence does not have part, the moment some initial sounds of a sentence are uttered, the entire sentence should be known. But that does not happen. So therefore, it should be believed that words have their own meaning. But in answer to that, Prabhakaras say that of course when one word is uttered, and the main word is basically the verb, as we have already seen. Because verb is the word which is suggestive of an action, and since Vedic words are injunctions, therefore the basic requirement is to have a verb in a sentence. So even if we have a verb, just one word, it works like a sentence. So they say yes, the moment you utter the first word and sort of preferably the verb, we know what is to be done, and therefore in a certain way sentence is complete. But then Bhatta's question is, then what is the function of the other words in that sentence? In answer to that, Prabhakaras say that other words narrow down the meaning. So say for example, like when somebody says go, the sentence in a certain sense is complete. We know what is to be done. So what is enjoined by the action, by this sentence, is already clear to us. Now then, what are the other words doing in that sentence? Other words narrow down the meaning. So say for example, we can say go slowly towards the right hand side, and so on and so forth. So we can keep adding, more and more adverbs, adjectives, and so on and so forth. But those words which come after the verb only narrow down. Therefore, their function is auxiliary in comparison to the verb. So they say that that other words are not superfluous, but they have a kind of less importance in comparison to the verb, which is the main central part of the sentence. Now, another argument that Bhattas offer against Prabhakaras is that though we understand the meaning of a word only in a sentence, what we understand is the meaning of the individual word. Otherwise, meaning learnt in one context would be redundant in another context. So, one of the arguments offered by Prabhakaras is that language learning always happens through the utterance of sentences. So what happens is we see some elders, sort of giving certain commands like close the door, and then we see certain other person who goes and does that task, performs that task. And thereby we understand the meaning of certain words that are uttered. So we learn the meaning of the word only through sentences. But if this is this is how language learning takes place, then in that case we'll have to learn, since words can occur in infinite number of sentences, in that case, in order to learn the meaning of the word, we'll have to learn infinite number of sentences, and Bhattas look at it as impossibility, and therefore they say that what follows from this is that words have their own individual meaning, and by learning a few words, we learn to make several sentences. So, if we sort of learn a definite set of a certain set of words, and we know the syntactical conditions that are to be met in order for certain meaningful sentences to be constructed, then by knowing a few words, we have the knowledge of constructing a large number of sentences. But that can happen only if we believe that words have their own individual independent meaning. But if words have the meaning only when they occur in a sentence, that would mean that in order to learn the meaning of a word, we require to know infinite number of sentences, which doesn't seem to stand to reason. Another argument is an argument from interdependence. If one word has meaning depending upon the other, when we say the word has a meaning only in a sentence, that means the meaning of the word is dependent upon the sentence, meaning dependent upon the set of other words. So if one word has meaning depending upon the other, then it would lead to anyonya ashraya. That would mean the meaning of the first word would depend upon the subsequent words, and the meaning of the subsequent word would depend upon the preceding word, because the context is also created by the word preceding. So this way, the meaning of the antecedent word would depend upon the preceding one, and the meaning of the preceding one would depend in turn upon the antecedent one, which would create, a sort of a vicious circle. And this kind of a fallacy is known as anyonya ashraya in Indian philosophy. Next argument offered by Bhattas is that we are able to recognize a person in different settings. Similarly, meaning of a word is recognizable in different sentential contexts. So, this is an argument from analogy. A person, could could appear in different settings. Say, for example, let's take an example here. Suppose there are different pictures, there are different photographs of a person, where the background is different. I mean, some photographs could have been taken in one location. Some other photographs could have been taken in another location. But irrespective, although the background is different, although the person may be wearing different colors, different clothes. Despite all that, we are able to recognize a person in different settings, and we know that is the same person even though the setting is different. Similarly, we are able to recognize a word distinctly in different sentences. So even in a particular background of meaning, a background of sentential meaning, despite that, we are able to recognize the individual meaning of the word as well, even in a sentential context. Another argument is argument from memory. Bhatta suggests that in long sentences, words are forgotten, but meanings stay in our mind. Otherwise, since previous words are forgotten by the end of sentence, meaning would be lost. So the argument here is that in long sentences, by the time we sort of come to like the later words, by that time we have lost track. We may not always remember what were the words uttered previously to that. But somewhere the meaning of those individual words stays in our mind, and through the projection of the meaning that we remember that those words have, we sort of project that meaning onto the remaining word, and this is how a larger sentential meaning, namely sentential meaning, is created. So given this process, it attests that words have their own meaning. Otherwise, in long sentences, we would, the sentential context may be lost by the time, we are reading the later portions of the sentence. Unless, we believe that words which have their own individual meaning, that is remembered, and in the light of that, we understand the meaning of the later portions. So, this is yet another argument. Now, what are the arguments that Bhattas, that go in, that Bhattas offer in favor of their own take on the issue? They point out that if a word goes missing in a sentence, something looks amiss. So, for example, suppose we utter a word, we sort of utter a sentence, there is a, and then I stop at that. Now, very distinctly, we know that this sentence is not completing. There is not complete. There is something amiss. So, this very idea of a sentence being complete or incomplete seems to point, seems to suggest to us that words could be complete or incomplete only if, words have individual units. Otherwise, any sentence, sentence in the sense of conglomeration of words would be meaningful in a certain way. But we know that if a word goes amiss, then, we know that there is something missing in the sentence. Now, there is another argument offered by Bhattas, which is argument from grammatical classification. We classify words as nouns, verbs, etc. because they have a meaning of their own. So, Bhattas say that, we know that there are certain words which work as pronouns. Say, for example, I, aham in Sanskrit, or tvam, you, these are certain words which have, their own nature. They are pronouns, and because of that, they are classified as pronouns. There are certain other words which are classified as nouns. That is possible only if we believe that words have their own character. Words, belong to certain types. And which would mean that words are independent units. But Prabhakaras, say in response to that, they say that this argument goes only in our favor, in the sense that Prabhakaras say that this goes on to prove that words have a place and meaning only in terms of their place in a sentence. So they say that what when we sort of divide, when we make certain classification like nouns, verbs, pronouns, and so on and so forth, these classification make sense only in the context of a sentence, not otherwise. So therefore, since all these classifications are done, as a part of sentence, and therefore, it's not an argument that goes counter to the suggestion offered by the Prabhakaras. Another argument offered by the Bhattas is, if sentence meaning were independent of word meaning, then any sentence could mean anything. But that is not the case. Therefore, since certain words occur in certain sentences, therefore sentence meaning is fixed. Not that any sentence could mean just about anything. And of course, we have already sort of seen language learning argument. According to Bhattas, language, is rather learnt by sort of also, among other things, ostensive definition. We sort of assign name to certain objects, and we sort of we know, sort of understand language. We learn language word by word. So friends, today we looked at the problem of word meaning and sentential meaning as different theories of meaning that are suggested by different schools, mainly among them grammarians, Bhatta-Mīmānsakas, Prabhakara-Mīmānsakas, and Naiyayikas. So we will end today's discussion here. Thank you.
With this note, thank you, sir. Thank you so very much for giving us this session on Śabda Pramāna. Dear friends, if you wish to give your feedback for this particular lecture, do write to us at info.cec@nic.in. We will be meeting again soon and would be discussing more. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again.